Uh, Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, Priyanka.
Good morning, Jonathan. All right, so we're just starting now with the webinar. So this is Priyanka Mathur from CIITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development. Thank you all for joining the webinar this morning. We will get started now, and I do see more people joining in to the webinar. So from the level of participation, it does seem that we primarily have companies which fall under the purview of Semicircular, which has gained momentum over the last couple of months. The participants are from among the top 500 listed companies, which can benefit from this webinar, which is focused on one of the 6 capitals of the framework, that is natural capital. So we are very encouraged, and once again, thank you very much. Before we get started, a quick look at the flow of this webinar. We will start with a quick recap of IR in India and understand Semicircular. This will be followed by discussing natural capital from IR framework's perspective. The third part of the webinar will touch upon natural capital valuation. And in the end, we will have a Q&A round for addressing the participants' queries and questions. I request all of you to please keep your questions short, and we will try to address as many as we can depending on the availability of time. I'm very glad to introduce our speakers for the webinar today, Jonathan and Arnab. Jonathan is Chief Sustainability Officer at International Integrated Reporting Council. He leads the IIRC's global policy work, which aims to create the conditions for integrated reporting to flourish. Since joining the IIRC in March 2012, Jonathan has traveled widely and has developed a deep insight into the major trends and policy developments in corporate reporting across the world. He has also worked on developing IIRC's understanding of Asian markets, building the knowledge and networks that will help to create and spread global best practice in corporate reporting. Our second speaker for today is Arnab, my colleague. He is an associate counselor currently working on CNI's initiative on business and biodiversity, responsible for overall project strategy, marketing, tools and training, and new service development. He's also been involved in providing advisory services on life cycle analysis and risk management. He has an overall 8.5 years of experience in project management of hydro projects, carbon finance as consultant and auditor. Myself, Priyanka Mathur, I have been part of the center since 2 years now, been primarily involved and leading IR Lab India and also Sustainable Plus label. I have the responsibility of reaching out to Indian corporates for adoption of the IR framework and thereby increase the pace of adoption in India. Also handhold first-time preparers with the focus on high-quality reporting of the framework. I have close to 10 years of work experience, which is spread out across sustainability, financial, and business research. A quick look at what our center does. So I'm sure you're all aware of what CESD does. We have a good working relationship with the people on this webinar. But for the ones who are new to us, very quickly, CIITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development is a not-for-profit industry-led institution. Our main mandate is to help companies become sustainable organizations from an economic, environment, social and governance point of view and make them entities that create sustainable value for the relevant stakeholders. And because we are part of the Confederation of Indian Industry, we are able to leverage our position to create an all-inclusive ecosystem of bringing the stakeholders, mainly the industry and the government, but also parts of the civil society and academia. And historically, we have been pioneers of integrated management systems, biodiversity mapping, sustainability reporting, social and natural capital valuation in India. As on date, we are in 3 different locations, Delhi, Gurugram, and Mumbai. CESD has also been active in parts of South and Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. It has held, we've held institutional partnerships and memberships of the United Nations Global Compact, GRI, and carbon disclosure projects, some development agencies of Canada, the USA, the UK, and Germany. And we are very glad that we are the ones to work with IIRC to bring integrated reporting in India. In a way, we are delighted that things have actually started to move forward. All in all, our attempt is to make Indian corporates globally competitive, but also in a sustainable manner. A quick look at the initiative of the Center on Integrated Reporting, which is called IR Lab India. It is a collective of different stakeholders of the business ecosystem. Of course, the companies that have to do integrated reporting, but also the market regulator, both the stock exchanges of the country, BSE and NSE. We also have the 3 professional institutes. We have academia and audit firms. So all of them are part of IR Lab India. Some of the key achievements I would like to highlight here. Semicircular on integrated reporting, as you all know, is voluntary at present. The regulator is still going to take some time to not making it mandatory and prescriptive. So we don't want it to go down the path of national voluntary guidelines and business responsibility reporting. What we believe it is really the practice, and the companies have to realize the value of integrated thinking and integrated reporting, rather than really, looking at it from a compliance point of view. This is an amazing management tool. Please grab the opportunity to look at it. We currently have 4 members who have practiced IR in their formats, in various formats. So one is Tata Steel, then we have Wipro, Reliance Industries, and Yes Bank. There's another member which requires a mention here is Tata Chemicals, which have also touched upon the 6 capitals and described the interlinkages in the latest annual report. So please go and have a look at their reports. There are many more companies outside the IR lab that are currently looking at integrated reporting, either in an internal release within the organization or an external release. So our estimate is that the number of companies coming out with an integrated report for financial year 2018 will almost be a double-digit number. And so this is what we have been, we've been engaging with a lot of companies, and we do feel the number is going to increase going forward. Then from the lab, we also have the guidance document, which we are soon going to formally launch in the beginning next year, and it will be accessible to all. And also there's an investor study, which is the first of its kind from the Indian context. We are more than halfway through the study, and we'll be releasing it by February 2018. All right, so how is Center of Excellence helping companies to do integrated reports? So one is capacity building, and that is through webinars like these. All our webinars are recorded and are available on our website for your benefit. We also conduct training workshops across India, both external workshops and in-company training sessions. Our recent one was conducted in Mumbai in September this year, and the next forthcoming workshop is scheduled in Delhi in December. Please do get in touch with my colleague Sanaya, who will help you with more details for this workshop. The other thing that the center does in terms of working towards companies to look at the integrated report is a gap analysis. It is primarily from the content point of view. We have helped some of the companies with gap analysis to begin with. Most of you would already have a lot of information that would go in an integrated report. And that would be as a result of your annual reporting, your corporate governance reporting, your sustainability reporting, BRR. So all of these that you would be doing anyways. So the gap analysis would help you identify what is the information that we already have and what is the information that we still do not have. With the information that you might have, there could be, again, 2 parts to that. One, that you could use the information as is. It's already in good shape to be put in your IR, in your integrated report. And the other part of information is something that needs to be sort of reorganized, repackaged, keeping in mind the requirements of the IR framework. And then wherever the gaps are, you have to get that information, then again, put it in a way that would be useful to put it out for your various stakeholders. We also help companies in understanding their sector. Sustainability, we do have the methodologies and expertise to value the social capital and the natural capital. So we are available to help you with these 2 capitals out of the 6 capitals. Now a quick sort of an explanation of what IR is in terms of reporting. As what the slide is showing, it's an evolution of corporate reporting. It is absolutely, I feel, important to understand that integrated reporting is not an improvement of financial reporting. It is not an improvement of your sustainability reporting. It is also not a combined report. It is also not like taking your annual report and your sustainability report, binding the 2 together into one report and saying, you know, here it is, this is my integrated report. It is not juxtaposing different reports together as, you know, one publication. So there was, I heard from one of the companies where we were discussing integrated reports. They said, you know, we saved about 50 pages. So it's actually not about, you know, just saving pages. It is what we feel is, you know, the companies should really understand that it is really about connecting the different issues, connecting the dots together, and therefore the term integrated. How do all those issues connect together is you know, in an integrated manner. As I mentioned before, it's a great management tool to first internalize it and then use it to communicate with your various stakeholders. How do you present that to your stakeholders is what integrated reporting is all about. Hence, I guess, you know, it is sufficient to then say that integrated reporting is an evolution of corporate reporting, taking it to the next level. A quick look at what the Semicircular, you know, says and its requirements. Those who still haven't had a chance as on 31st March of the financial year. So the companies have to prepare the BRR, are also now recommended to voluntarily prepare integrated reports. When does it get into force? So actually the next financial year. So when you are looking at reporting of the next financial year of FY18 is when it gets into force. That would be your first annual report to convert into integrated report. How do you publish the annual report? This is something which is very interesting. There is no need to prepare a separate integrated report in terms of printing it. So you don't have to necessarily publish and print a separate integrated report, make one and put it on the company's website. However, if you have already prepared, reference it in the annual report and that would suffice. Which part of the company's website? Ideally, you know, in the investors section where all the periodic reporting goes. So whether it's your corporate governance report, financial statements, your annual reports, gradually now we are even seeing the sustainability reports in the investor section. So that's where the ideal integrated report would also feature. Now, how you should prepare the integrated report? There are 3 options. The reason why there are these options given is because the practice of preparing an integrated report is relatively new. It is only 4 years since IR framework was launched. That was in December 2013. And therefore, there are 3 different types of practices. And even in India, we've seen, for instance, Wipro, for its annual report published for last 2 consecutive financial years. So the company has strategically structured its management discussion analysis section according to integrated reporting principles and capitals to highlight the importance of non-financial disclosures. Another example is Tata Steel, which converted its entire annual report, again, for the last 2 financial years, into integrated reports. So, as the slide says, there are these, those are the 2 options. And then there's a third one, also which is in use around the world, where you can have a separate chapter. So for instance, if you have an annual report, you could actually begin the annual report with a comprehensive and brief integrated report, and then your annual report could follow. So, so as I said, these 3 options have been given because the practice is new, and we will see how the companies progress from here and what is the most preferred option. And then perhaps in the future, there might be just one way of putting the integrated report. Now, when you have an integrated report, there'll be a lot of content which will overlap with the various, parts of the annual report or different reports. For instance, we have the director's report, we have the financial statements, we have the business responsibility report, sustainability report for that matter. So all of that, you don't have to necessarily repeat or duplicate the information in the section. All that is required is that, you can cross-reference the information. And so keep your integrated report brief and concise in a way actually it is supposed to be. The details could be in the relevant disclosures, which is stipulated either by the regulators or, you are already using voluntary reporting frameworks, such as the GRI for your sustainability report. So look at the entire web of different reports and disclosures that you do, and then use the cross-referencing rather than, I would again like to highlight that do not duplicate, do not replicate the information, but cross-references and put the links there. Now, so as the title of the webinar is Natural Capital in the Context of Integrated Reporting. Now, the definition of natural capital as per the IR framework is all renewables and non-renewable environmental resources and processes that provide goods or services that support the past, current, or future prosperity of an organization. And it includes your air, water, land, biodiversity, and ecosystem health. Now, this diagram is one way to depict the capitals. So financial and manufactured capitals are the ones organizations most commonly report on. IR takes a broader view by also considering your intellectual capital, your social and relationship, and your human capital, all of which are linked to the activities of humans, and natural capital, which provides the environment in which all the other capitals sit. So I'd like to stop here and request Jonathan to give us a perspective of this capital from the IR framework's perspective. So over to you, Jonathan.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Priyanka. I would like to begin by first of all asking whether you can see my, you can't see my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can, Jonathan.
That's wonderful, thank you. Well, Priyanka, thank you so much, and thank you to CESD for all the work that you do in India with the IR lab, the India IR lab. It was a great privilege for me to be at the launch of the lab about 3 years ago, and it's wonderful to hear the news of its development and its success in India, and also we're particularly pleased, of course, with the Semicircular. It is my pleasure to speak to you today about natural capital and integrated reporting. And what I want to do is put natural capital into the context of the value creation story of a company. Because the idea of natural capital and the idea of sustainability reporting and of sustainable development is not new. And companies have been asked to report on their impact on the environment and on society for a number of years now, because we have known for a long time that the natural resources of our planet are scarce, and that business has both an impact and a responsibility to help preserve those resources in order to create value into the future. And what integrated reporting seeks to do is enhance the accountability and the stewardship for the broad range of and management of the resources of our world, whether they are intellectual resources, financial resources, human resources, or indeed the natural resources of our planet. And as you will all know, in December 2013, the International Integrated Reporting Council released the first integrated reporting framework in the world, which sets the principles for how to integrate all those different aspects of reporting to tell a very cohesive, coherent, clear, and concise story of value creation. And the purpose is to promote an understanding not only about value creation, but about the interdependency between the different capitals, between the different resources that an organization uses in order to create value. Because what we have today in our corporate reporting, as Priyanka alluded to, is an information gap. We have financial capital reported in financial statements, and quite often we then have other reporting that is reported to other stakeholders, sometimes in a different timeline and sometimes in a different format. So the financial implications of natural capital are not always communicated in a very clear and coherent way. For example, if you take the example of Unilever, the global consumer goods company, Unilever has the strategic ambition to double in size over the next 10 years, but to do so in a completely environmentally sustainable way, not adding a single element to its carbon footprint. So in order to deliver that as a strategy, it's necessary to measure and understand and be held accountable for the natural resources that Unilever uses. And it's vital that the strategic impact of that decision is understood as well. So what Unilever have done in order to deliver on that ambition is they have changed their business model. So now by investing in parts of the world where they can grow their business and double in size, what they're facing are the natural capital challenges. They're investing in parts of the world where there is water scarcity. So they're now changing their business model to develop products that do not use water in the same way as their business model has done in the past. So they are reducing their impact of water, they are reusing water, recycling water, and overall, therefore, limiting their environmental footprint whilst growing their business model, but growing their business. And so understanding the strategy and how you're implementing those decisions in a way that is promoting sustainable development is absolutely critical, and having a framework that enables you to articulate your business model and your strategy and all the resources that go into that and how those resources are then transformed by your activities is really the fundamental goal of integrated reporting, so that you can show that value creation story over time and that you're contributing towards sustainable development, which is so critical from a business, from an investment, and from a regulatory perspective. Because if you don't do that, if you're hiding information, then you're hiding value, and that means that that value cannot be released. The evidence shows that companies that are doing integrated reporting are attracting a different kind of investor. They're attracting long-term investors and deterring traders and short-term investors. A major study from Harvard Business School shows that. Other studies from around the world show that integrated reporting reduces the cost of capital because you're managing the risks and you're showing your investors that you're managing showing how it is managing water usage, reducing, reusing, recycling water. It is building a better dialogue with its stakeholders, its financial and non-financial stakeholders, and reinforcing trust in the business. And that helps to build value over time. So natural capital, as Priyanka said, is one of the 6 capitals that we identify in the integrated reporting framework. And these capitals are interlinked. They are absolutely dependent upon each other for creation of value. Now, Priyanka mentioned the definition, and I just want to repeat that definition of natural capital that we use in the framework. All renewable and non-renewable environmental resources and processes that provide goods or services that support the past, current, or future prosperity of an organization. And that sense of the horizon for reporting, that with integrated reporting, you're not just reporting on past performance, but also on the current and future prosperity of the organization, including all those natural resources, the air, water, land, minerals, and forests, and also biodiversity and ecosystem health. And we're now seeing companies, and I will speak a little bit more about this in a moment, we're seeing companies talk now and report on their natural capital and how that is helping them to build value over time. Priyanka showed one representation of the capitals and how they're used by a business. This diagram is taken from the integrated reporting framework, and it really shows how we are giving equality to each of those resources down the left-hand side of this diagram: the financial, the manufactured, the intellectual, human, social and relationship, but also critically natural capital. For the first time, giving parity to all the resources and relationships that a business uses to create value. We're not putting financial and manufactured capital on a pedestal. We're putting them alongside the other critical resources used by a business in order to go about its business and create value over time. And then in the middle of that diagram is the business model. And it really is the business model that we encourage businesses to articulate in their integrated report. How are they using that natural capital? How is that natural capital being transformed by those business activities? And what outcomes are you seeing, both for the environment and for the business itself? Because one of the critical aspects of integrated reporting is that integrated reporting isn't just about the impact of the business on the environment and on society, but how that impact then translates into the business itself on its strategy and its business model. So how are you using that impact in order to change your business model to become a more sustainable business, and a business that is going to be future fit for the long term, so that you can attract those long-term stakeholders, whether it's suppliers and customers or investors? Now, integrated reporting and the focus on natural capital is consistent with many trends and developments in the world today. The Financial Stability Board Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures reported earlier this year. And one of its major conclusions is that that task force of experts from the capital markets around the world said that they no longer wanted to see separate siloed reports on climate-related matters. They wanted that the impact, the financial impact of climate change to be reflected in the mainstream disclosures, the mainstream financial disclosures of an organization. And it concluded that by encouraging disclosures of climate-related financial information into those public filings, coordination between organizations, climate-related risk experts, and the finance function will improve. Because another one of the great focuses of integrated reporting is to break down the internal silos within organizations that prevent that interconnectivity of information being used both internally within the business to drive decision making, but also to provide insight from outside the business by investors and other stakeholders as well. So that task force on climate-related financial disclosures really putting an onus on the business to integrate the information, the non-financial information, within the mainstream financial disclosures of the organization. And that we believe that that is a critical development in the world of financial and corporate reporting. Now, earlier this year, in fact, very recently, we were very grateful to ICAS, the accounting body, and also to the renowned academic, Professor Carol Adams, for writing a report for integrated reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals, which obviously are a major theme for the way businesses should be operating and articulating how they're operating in the modern world. 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, putting the onus on businesses as well as governments and others in the capital markets to really change their business models and demonstrate how they're contributing towards sustainable development in the future. And the report, which is freely available on the IIRC's website, shows the corporate reporting process and how the corporate reporting process is changing over time, from a financial only model to one that really prioritizes risks around environmental, social and governance issues. And another major theme that we're seeing is not only developments and challenges coming from the policy community, but also an increasing focus by investors on these environmental, social and governance factors. They are looking to come to companies to report on these matters, and they are actually valuing businesses more highly if they report on these matters, because it shows that they're managing their risks and they become a less risky investment proposition into the future. And what the report that Professor Adams did for the IRC shows is how the capitals map to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And what it shows in particular in relation to natural capital is that natural capital may be related to 9 of those Sustainable Development Goals. So if you're looking as a business to contribute to the Sustainable Development Agenda, then 9 of those goals are relevant in terms of the natural capital identified in the integrated reporting framework. And this new model, this new way of looking at value creation, mapping it to the Sustainable Development Goals, is just one way that a business might evolve its reporting to demonstrate how it is committed to achieving these Sustainable Development Goals. And in that report, we identify 5 key steps for a business in helping them to contribute to the SDGs. Firstly, around understanding sustainable development issues within the organization and how that is relevant to the external environment. Secondly, the whole issue of materiality, identifying those material issues, having a materiality determination process that is responsive to sustainable development matters, and making sure that the senior management of the business is signing off on those key material issues. Develop a strategy and make sure that your strategy and your business model is consistent with those material issues and demonstrate how you're contributing to the SDGs through the development of that business model. Fourthly, develop integrated thinking, breaking down of silos, showing the connectivity between the information within your business and how that is linked to corporate governance. And finally, produce an integrated report, which is your outward-facing accountability document showing how you're contributing value and also contributing to the SDGs. Now, Priyanka mentioned the Semicircular. What I want to do is just outline in this final couple of slides now how the SEBI statement is really consistent with existing principles of securities regulation. In that Semicircular, the justification, or one of the justifications for asking companies in India to do integrated reporting, was IOSCO Principle 16, one of the global universal principles of securities regulation in the world, that there should be full, accurate and timely disclosure of financial results, risk and other information which is material to investors' decisions. And for years now, we focused on that financial result, that financial risk, but critical is the other information that's material to investors' decisions. And increasingly, that other information, it relates to natural capital and issues that we've been talking about today. There are many examples of companies in the world that are starting to use the capitals model in order to show how they create value. And on the integrated reporting examples database, again on our website, you can see examples of companies, over 400 companies now in the world, and how they're using the capitals, how they're using our framework to really demonstrate their commitment to the effective use and efficient use of different resources. I'm showing you here an example from ABN AMRO and the different capitals that they're using and how that plugs into the purpose of the organization, and what and how the value is created from the inputs of those capitals, including the natural capital, and how they're measuring the impact of the natural capital, and how then the value drawn from that is shared between their different stakeholders, their clients, their employees, society at large, and their investors. So this is just a really clear diagram of their value creation process, how they create value and how they share value between those different capitals for their different stakeholders. SAP, the German technology company, is another good example of a company using the multi-capital model and showing the linkages between the different capitals to give a sense of a connected view of the performance of the business. And again, they use environmental factors together with financial factors to demonstrate how together value is being created. If you go on their website, you can really get a sense of how they're using technology to show the linkages between those different capitals, to show that connected sense of performance. Excuse me. And what they're beginning to do, SAP, is measure the financial impact of those non-financial resources. And they first started doing that in respect of their human capital, showing what a change of 1% in their employee engagement score would have on their financial performance. And that has changed the way the organization is governed. So their human resources director now sits on the board of the company, and they have regular discussions at the board meeting about how they retain and recruit the best talent for the business, because they can understand the financial impact of good human resource management. And that is happening across the business, across the different resources, including across natural capital. I want to conclude, Priyanka and colleagues, by just talking a little bit for the next minute about the corporate reporting dialogue that the IRC has convened. Because the IRC and the IRC framework doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know, we were created by GRI, by the international accounting standards, by the accounting profession globally, IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, because it was viewed by GRI and by the accounting community that financial reporting and sustainability reporting needed to come together in order to tell that holistic story of value creation. And so by convening the corporate standards, CDP standards, how they connect to the different capitals in the integrated reporting framework. And you can see the different moons there alongside the natural capital. And if you click on those moons on the website, you can see the specific standards in those frameworks and standards that relate to natural capital. So if you're preparing an integrated report, you can see which standards are most relevant in the world to that whole picture of natural capital. So we regard the corporate reporting dialogue as a real effort by the corporate reporting community to come together and show to the world how these organizations are working together to fit into a clear picture of corporate reporting that helps coherence and consistency in the world. Well, I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope that that's been a useful introduction to the whole area of natural capital, how we view it from a value creation perspective at the Integrated Reporting Council. I would urge you, we're a not-for-profit organisation. Everything that we produce is freely available. We have a lot of resources on our website, including the framework itself, but also tools like research, and also the examples database for you to be able to really understand better in a practical way how companies are starting to adopt integrated reporting. Of course, in India itself, the work of CESD, the IR lab, is your first port of call, full of resources, full of energy and dynamism. And again, Priyanka, I just wanted to thank you and your team for the work that you're doing to bring integrated reporting to life in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for helping us understand this one of this important capital, natural capital, from IR framework's perspective, and also where IRC is heading globally in terms of the corporate reporting, and of course the council's doing a lot. And from the India region's perspective, CIITC, Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development, through IR Lab India, is always there to help first-time preparers, the companies, to handhold them, to help them start the integrated reporting journey. So thank you once again, Jonathan. And now I would like to hand over to Arna. He is he's part of the business and biodiversity team at CESD, and he'll help us understand the natural capital from the valuation perspective. Over to you, Arna.
Hello, I'm audible, Priyanka?
Yes, Arnav, you're audible, and if we can, yes, now we can see your screen as well.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Jonathan, for your overview about how natural capital fits in the IR framework. And thank you, Priyanka, for organizing this webinar and giving me an opportunity to also present the case of natural capital valuation, which we have been doing for the last 2-3 years, and we have been trying to develop a framework, a methodology, which can help the Indian corporates to start valuing the natural capital and also start reporting it. In this part of webinar, I would be discussing the natural capital as one of the capitals in integrated reporting. What is natural capital, how it can be valued, and how it can be translated in company's balance sheet. To begin, a brief about the India Business and Biodiversity Initiative, which you can see as a small logo in the slide, which is being hosted by CI for the last 4 years and was created when we received an invitation from MFCC to have an initiative where we involve the business and the businesses together to start doing actions and also to start having strategy towards management of biodiversity or natural capital, which is a very key part for all businesses in India as well as globally. At present, there are 26 members who are signatory to the initiative. And under this very initiative, the concept of valuation of natural capital was actually discussed. And then it was also thought as a critical element which a company may start now thinking about and also start valuing, so that they can know what is the impact of their businesses on biodiversity or natural capital and how much they're dependent on it and how to create value. So this toolkit, which is called Natural Capital Externalities, has been developed by CII-CESD using the help of its member companies and also in partnership with GIST Advisory. We all know what is natural capital, at least for the last 15-20 minutes we have been there, discussed about it. Just to begin the webinar, let me give a perspective in terms of how we also think about natural capital. The natural capital is a stock of ecosystems that yields a renewable flow of goods and services that underpin the economy and provides inputs and benefits to businesses and society. For example, food or fiber or the water, energy, timber, climate security, etc. Now, the companies depend and impact on natural capital through extraction and production. And over exploitation of the natural capital causes volatility in the prices, and as well as it provides the business constraints across the world economy. Now, natural capital among all the capital is a very complex capital, given its relation with multiple other capitals, as well as when we talk about natural capital, we start talking about the services that the ecosystems provide to us. An ecosystem in itself is very complex. It has food chains, it has genetic resources, it has species diversity, it has got habitats, and all of this contribute to the services that we use in businesses for various purposes. And so for businesses, typically a natural capital can be first understood as a set of resources and benefit streams, and also as a critical production assets, and as well as the natural risk mitigation services, which is provided by well-functioning ecosystems. Now, based on its definition and understanding, it is observed that the businesses impact natural capital through its various drivers, or we can also call it externalities, such as air pollution, GHG emissions, land use change, water extraction, water and land pollution, waste, and using genetic resources from biodiversity, as well as the ecosystem services that we get from the biodiversity. So all those driver categories has been now presented here as also the drivers which are related to the driver categories, such as for air pollution. We look at various drivers such as particulate matter, VOCs, then SOx, NOx, CO2, CO. For land use change, it's typically for the existing land use cover and the construction of your plants, offices, roads, water. It's a direct natural resource which every industry across the world uses. Then the water and land pollutants such as BOD, COD, TSS, as well as pesticides and chemicals from various processes. And then the waste, which are typically categorized as hazardous and non-hazardous waste. Now, all these drivers impact natural capital at many stages, but significantly can be categorized based on the midpoint change and the endpoint change. And this is based on this, the methodology or the valuation framework has been created for all individual drivers. And this is how we have started working on the concept of natural capital based on the externalities from businesses. Like mentioned, all the drivers have a midpoint change, which are typically, like in case of GHG or air pollution, are the emissions, water extraction from fresh water or groundwater or surface water, then waste generation, and then the land use change. Now, all this midpoint change have an endpoint impact based on which the valuation can be conducted. So typically for air pollution, you can see the endpoint impacts could be the direct or the indirect cost of health impacts on the human life. Similarly, for the waste generation, we can see, depending upon the pollutant type released into air, water, or land, the valuation methodology's specific driver can be applied. Finally, the land use change, the endpoint impacts would be the loss in ecosystem services due to the change of habitats or destruction of habitats. So in the coming slides, what I have planned, because there are many drivers to cover and all of them in detail would be really hard, and we have obviously a limited time. So I would be explaining one of the driver in details and the rest in brief, so that we have a clear understanding of the framework, that how robust it is and how holistically we have tried to cover so that we arrive at a value. Now, to start with, I'll give a detailed description about one of the key driver, and which we can also, why? Because we can see the condition of Delhi, the air pollution being at such a severe status now. We can understand that this driver is something which impacts human life at large. So the air pollution has highest impact on human health, which is almost 95%. And this is as per the study conducted by Mueller and Mendelssohn. And the rest is around 5%. Hence, the evaluation is based on the concept that if air emissions concentration increases in the surroundings, the impact is calculated directly based on human health conditions, disorders, diseases, cases that increase because of the air quality degradation. Out here, the chart shows that 95% of the total cost, which is on human health and somehow to agriculture, we can see how it either affects as the number of morbidity cases or the mortality cases, which further trickles down to the direct cost of illness, number of cases of deaths, and also the loss of productivity in the agriculture sector. Now we know the driver and the biophysical change, which is directly the increase in concentration of the air pollutants in the atmosphere, which then obviously affects human life. So after knowing the midpoint change, we come down to the modeling. And the modeling at here, what we're doing is a dispersion modeling to arrive or to know the scale and also the population that will be impacted based on the dispersion modeling, where we use two main processes, namely the AirMet and the AirMap. After overlaying the AirMod results over the population in that region and the concentration at different points, we can figure out the population that would be at high risk zone and those who are in moderate or low risk zone. So once you know the amount of population which is at a risk based on air pollutants in the atmosphere, we calculate the cases of mortality and morbidity based on two major methods out of many which are there. One being the relative risk method, the other being the dose response function. Because these methods are being used worldwide to calculate the mortality and the morbidity cases, and as well as both the cases, the methods are mathematically sound as well as statistically very accurate. Finally, we arrive based on the impacts, we calculate the cost of air pollution, which is based on the cost of illness approach among the other three, one being the willingness to pay and the value of statistical life. Now, both of them becomes a big discussion or a big point of argument, but the cost of illness approach typically is also being very robust. It also helps us to understand the number of people being affected in a particular area, and also the data are easily available in over the internet as well as various government offices. And based on that, we calculate the DALY, which is the disability adjusted life year, which is based on the years of life and years lost due to disability. When we calculate the DALY, we finally calculate the years lost due to disability, and based on that, we arrive at the cost of the air pollution in a particular area. Similarly, if we can look at the other drivers, one being the greenhouse gases. So I've mapped it across the valuation framework that we are using, giving a brief about the various stages that we use, right from the driver to the biophysical change in the atmosphere, and the modeling, outcomes, and valuation. So driver at this case being GHG gases, the biophysical change is typically the increase in concentration of GHG in the atmosphere and the global impact of it. The modeling that we use is based on the US EPA, which is the Integrated Assessment Model, and namely by using the fund, page, and dice model to estimate impact. And this is basically the model which is used by each and every individual to arrive at an outcome based on the GHG emissions. Now, the outcomes out here we can look at are the increase in the global temperatures leading to the impacts, as well as the net agriculture productivity, human health, property damages from increased flood risk, and change in value of ecosystem services due to the climate change. And finally, we arrive at a value based on the social cost of carbon. Now, the social cost of carbon are provided by the EPA, where they have calculated at various level of confidence at a very discounting rate what should be the cost of carbon per ton of CO2 equivalent. The next driver, which we can again understand, is the land use change. The driver being the change in land use, the biophysical change, immediately being the land transformation. The modeling that we can use is estimating the total area transformed, direct estimation from the company data, of course, and as well as the estimation through the GIS file and looking into the land use before and after the change. Outcomes, based on the modeling, we arrive at the loss of the ecosystem services because of the land transformation, and the valuation are based on the ecosystem services valuation of that particular area. Now, for in Indian case, we use a lot of data which is being published by TEEB for, say, a riverine system or a forest system or wetland or even it's a grassland. So all those different type of land and land types and the habitats which have been valued by them, those being also region specific, are used to do the valuation of the land use change. Fourthly, we come to the land and the water pollutant, where similar to the air pollution, we again look at the release of water and land pollutants, which is based on the biophysical change being increased concentration of the pollutant chemicals in the water and the land. The model in this case again being the estimating increased concentration of pollutants, fate, and transport modeling. Use of physical properties like partitioning coefficient. The outcomes being typically it has a huge impact on biodiversity. Also, it increases the treatment cost of water. And finally, as a health impact similar to the air pollution. In this case, also we use the DALI method that we have discussed in the air pollution driver. Then we also calculate based on the externalities of the water treatment. And finally, based on the impact on the biodiversity and the loss of ecosystem services, which is similar to what we do in the land use change. Fifthly, we come down to the water consumption being one of the key natural resource which is being used by all industry. The driving being the water supply demand gap, the biophysical change being the decreased water availability, the modeling being the indicators like the water stress index, and the ratio between the water demand and supply. Outcomes based on the modeling typically being the competition to other sectors, especially agriculture, leading to malnutrition, increased waterborne disease incidences, impact on biodiversity, and the many others. Finally, we arrive at the valuation based on again the DALI method, which is the cost of illness and productivity loss due to the malnutrition, and as well as loss to agriculture sector, and also the loss of ecosystem services due to the loss of biodiversity, which is again due to over extraction of water from a particular surface water or the groundwater. One of the last being the impacts on biodiversity, which is again the mix of all the other drivers that we have discussed so far, which is the drivers in this case being all those drivers such as the land and water pollutant and the water extraction, which increases the stress level of biodiversity, which then further being modeled based on the potential decrease in the species richness in that area and impact on the net primary productivity of the region. Outcomes being the loss in species richness and loss in net primary productivity, and valuation being the loss of ecosystem services due to loss in biodiversity or the net primary productivity. But typically in the case of natural capital, one of the key part is always being the loss of ecosystem services. Now the loss of ecosystem services is again related to the loss in biodiversity of that area. And in this case, or in many cases, the biodiversity being either the loss in number of species in that area, number of genetic resources in that area, or also loss in different ecosystems in a particular area. Finally, we can see this is a slide which has been taken from the Natural Capital Declaration, one of the publications, where they've shown how a balance sheet in which they have the financial numbers of typically of the company, but as well as they have also considered all the different drivers, like we have mentioned so far, GHG emissions, the land use change, and the water extraction in this case. And they've shown the cost in the company's balance sheet, also in terms of the number of that particular driver, and also in terms of cost of that driver. Now, the company to undergo this exercise would actually just need to provide typically their environmental data, which is either submit in the Form 5 or any other form of data that they submit to the government, or maybe for internal purposes, or they provide their LCA data, a detailed LCA data, which can help us to reach at the cost at a more granular level. Now, this toolkit has been created in line with the Natural Capital Protocol, their impact and dependency methodology, their why, what, how, and so what methodology, as well as it also syncs with the IIRC framework. The toolkit is beyond an environmental profit and loss calculation, as it also provides the company an opportunity to decide on environment-friendly technologies using a cost-benefit analysis. Like, for example, you want to implement a particular, say, either a backfilter or a ESP in your stacks so that you can limit the amount of emissions that you have in the nearby area. After undergoing this particular exercise, you know what is the cost of air pollution in that particular area. And it provides a good case study on the cost benefit that if you are investing 10 crores now, but you are, because of the 10 crores, you might be saving the cost due to the air pollution, which is around 50 crores in that particular area. It makes perfect sense. And as well as it makes perfect sense to provide it to the board and ask them that this is what the benefit we are getting from having a better technology in place, and also trying to limit the amount of pollution our activities are having on the nearby regions. Now, a small brief about the NCX. So far, around 7 Indian corporates are using the tool as pilots, though the work is still undergoing, and we would be completing the pilot work by February or March next year, beyond which we would be publishing a manual for other industries of similar sectors to follow, and what they can do and how they can do the valuation on their own as well. That's all from my side. Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Arnab, for this extensive technical aspect of valuation of natural capital. Such valuation tool may be very important to some industries in India, and I hope that the companies can utilize this and make the most of it in terms of evaluating their key metrics, key KPIs when it comes to the natural capital. So thank you once again, Arnab.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Okay. I'd request the participants to, if they have any questions, please let us know. We are here.